In the opening scene, we see a janitor walking alone after cleaning, and he hears some weird noises. He sees a girl in tears with cats in her hand. She asks him to call for help, and he goes around trying to find help for her. However, another girl with blood in her hands runs to the janitor and tells him to run away. The scene changes as we are introduced to Riley, a high school girl who is forced to relocate with her father, Chris, because he wants a fresh start. Despite her reluctance, she must follow her father's relocation plan. Chris is an English teacher, so he gets another job at the high school to teach, and Riley resumes at the same school. While driving her to school, he appreciates her decision to join him despite breaking close bonds. She refuses to enter the school with him because she doesn't want anyone to recognize her as Chris's daughter. While at school, Kyla, who is the yearbook photographer, takes photographs of the students. While she does her duty, she sees Chris and instantly gets attracted to him. She takes numerous pictures of him before her classmate Tricia, who is a trendy and beautiful girl, comes to her and asks her to take her picture. After taking Tricia's picture, Kyla concentrates her attention on Chris, and this draws Tricia's attention to him. Tricia informs Kyla that Chris is their new English teacher, and he is so hot, she feels it would only take her about 2 days to get Chris wrapped around her fingers. Her statement infuriates Kyla. In their first class with Chris, Tricia tries to get Chris's attention by doing numerous things, like pressing her phone and playing with her hair, but he doesn't care. He advises the students that he hopes they will be able to confide in him as a teacher. After class, Chris waves to Riley and Kyla notices. Meanwhile, Tricia goes to meet Chris and tries to flirt with him. Riley goes to a private place to draw, and Kyla comes to meet her there. She befriends Riley and she takes Riley's picture. She hopes to include Riley's picture in the yearbook, so she subtly asks for Riley's last name. Left with no choice, Riley reveals that she is Chris's daughter, and Kyla promises to keep her secret. Kyla mentions having trouble with the subject and suggests they read together, so Riley invites her over. After school, Kyla follows Riley to the car, and she takes a secret photograph of Chris. At home, Chris asks Riley about her first day at school, and Riley reveals that she made friends with Kyla. Meanwhile, at home, Kyla meets her mom, Jess, preparing for a date. Kyla wonders who could have given her mom such a beautiful dress. Jess then promises to share more details about the man she is dating when the relationship gets stronger. Later in her room, Kyla fantasizes about making out with Chris. She touches herself and pleasures in the thought. In the next scene, Kyla visits Riley at her house. She learns Riley's mom cheated on Chris, which explains why Riley stays with Chris after their divorce. Kyla also reveals that her father left her at a very young age. When Riley leaves the room, she goes to Chris's room and lies on his bed. She fantasizes about how awesome it would be for her to make out with Chris. Sometime later at school, they have another class with Chris, and Tricia makes several attempts to get closer to Chris, but she fails. Tricia decides to look for Riley after class. She reveals she knows Riley is Chris's daughter and has seen them go home together often. She promises to keep the secret and asks Riley about her friendship with Kyla. She warns Riley that Kyla has never made a male friend, so Riley should be careful. She asks Riley to be her shopping partner for that night, and when Kyla sees them, she gets jealous. After Tricia leaves, she walks to Riley angrily and hits her. She warns Riley not to be friends with Tricia because Tricia is dangerous, and she wants to use her to get Chris. She says there had been an incident when Tricia got unnecessarily close to the history teacher, and it became so complicated that the teacher was replaced before the end of the term. She doesn't want that to happen to Chris. Riley appreciates Kyla for her advice. At home, Kyla calls Riley to ask about her birthday, and she suggests that they should organize a birthday party at Chris's home, since Riley is turning 18. She also inquires about students pursuing Chris, but Riley has no knowledge of such incidents. Riley reveals that Chris is currently dating someone he met at the grocery store. That is when Kyla recalls her mom talking about meeting a man there too. Moments later, Chris arrives at their house. Kyle feels so uncomfortable about Jess's relationship with Chris, and she tries to sabotage their date by pouring water on Chris's clothes. Left with no other choice, they have a home date. Kyla goes to her room and she sees the lovers kissing. So she screams and says someone is stalking her. She insists she wants to stay with them, and Chris tells her he is fine with it. Since Riley is on a date with Tricia, Chris decides not to go home. The following day, Kyla accidentally enters the bathroom and sees Chris naked. Awkward, she immediately closes the door. Since Chris is also going to school, she decides to take Kyla in his car. While they wait for Riley in front of the house, Kyla tries to flirt with him again until Riley arrives. At school, Kyla confronts Riley about her friendship with Trisha. Riley questions her about not telling the truth because Trisha claims it was Kyla who seduced the history teacher last year. This leads to an argument between them, and Riley walks away. Afterward, Kyla confronts Trisha and warns her to stay away from Riley. That night, Kyla takes seductive photographs of herself, and the following day, when she opens her locker, she finds the photographs there. She goes to Chris and complains that she is being harassed and wants him to get justice for her. She updates Jess on her college admission and urges her to promise to end her relationship with Chris if anything seems off. Later, Riley feels bad about accusing Kyla, so she goes to her and apologizes. Kyla confesses that she was the one who was involved in the scandal with the history teacher. She claims she sent the pictures to the teacher and she doesn't know how it got released, but she suspects Trisha did it. They reconcile by hugging each other. After school the next day, Riley needs to stay back for an activity, so Chris takes Kyla home. He returns to her house later for a date with Jess, but while he is in the bathroom, Kyla shows Jess that there is a message from Trisha on Chris's phone, suggesting that they have an affair. Jess gets furious and she accuses Chris of sleeping with a student. She sends him out of her house, and while he stays in the car, Kyla comes to seduce him. She succeeds in kissing him and tells him that is the tip before leaving. It is revealed that Kyla was the culprit who sent those messages to Chris's phone. At school, Trisha tries to flirt with Chris, but Kyla destroys her plan when she goes to give Chris the coat he left at their home. Later, the police arrive and take Trisha away. After school, Riley talks about her concern for Trisha, but Kyla claims it's not her problem. At home, Jess talks about how a phone used to send messages to Chris was found in Trisha's locker, which also contains those seductive pictures of Kyla. On Riley's birthday, Kyla brings gifts and a bottle of alcohol, insisting no one should turn 18 without a drink. She excuses herself and goes inside the house. She meets Chris and seduces him. Although he tries to send her away, he eventually gives in. Just when they are about to have intercourse, Riley arrives. Shocked at what she sees, Riley angrily walks out, and when Chris catches up with her and tries to explain for himself, she refuses and leaves. He returns to get dressed while Kyla begs him to stay. Realizing he had just screwed things up, Chris goes to find Riley regardless. In the next scene, Riley sends a message to Jess, reporting the situation. At school, Chris tries to talk to Riley, but she refuses and leaves. After class, Kyla tries to get closer to Chris again, but Jess arrives, and she slaps Chris twice before taking Kyla away. Outside the classroom, Kyla gets angry at Jess for interfering in her love life, and claims Jess is just jealous that she can't get Chris. Kyla claims she is legal, and she is in love with Chris. Meanwhile, Riley and Chris reconcile by the pool. The following day, Trisha meets Kyla, who confesses she was the one who set Trisha up. She asks Trisha to hit her, but when Trisha refuses, she hits herself and even breaks her finger. Chris and Riley coincidentally drive in and call for an ambulance. At the hospital, Kyla apologizes to her mother and reassures she will end things. She also apologizes to Riley and begs Riley to let her see her father for the last time. After Riley leaves, she meets Chris as she is completely obsessed with him. She suggests further harnessing their relationship. This leaves Chris no choice and he decides to resign so that he will never see her again. He immediately goes to school to clear his table. Unconvinced, Kyla takes a scalpel from the hospital and flees. At school, she confronts and stabs Riley, telling her there is only space for one lady in Chris's life. She goes to Chris's office and threatens him. He pushes her away, but when she retaliates, he hits his head and collapses. This draws the attention of the janitor, who sees Kyla pretending to be weak, and he goes to find help. Riley asks the janitor to run, but Kyla slits his throat from the back. She immediately draws her attention to Riley and chases her, wanting to get rid of her. Fortunately, Riley is able to immobilize Kyla. The ambulance arrives and the girls are taken to the hospital. Months later, Chris relocates again with Riley and takes a new job. He sees Riley off as she drives to college, and a random figure watches them from afar, signifying that Kyla may be stalking Chris due to her obsession. Subscribe to watch more videos like this, leave a like to help the channel out. Also, leave a comment if you'd like us to recap your favorite movie. Thanks for watching.